You're going in for your first day of piano lessons. You sit down and the teacher tells you to start composing. You sit confused and tell him you've never played the piano before, and he says, yeah, how do you think you get better? Making someone execute in a skill they don't have the foundations of is absurd.
What the fuck was that?
You never tell someone to try to speak in another language without first learning its grammar. It's natural that we would learn the first principles of a skill before learning how to execute. That is, unless you're a writer. In the beginning of 2022, I tried to write a screenplay. I love making story ideas, but I soon realized that actually sitting down to write was a whole different matter. A matter I was absolutely garbage at, mind you. I was devastated by my noobness and felt absolute hell anytime I tried to attempt to write. I lacked the backbone of practice required to write or even attempt a finished story. It seemed every time I tried to write a short story or otherwise, I would come up blank. I didn't have the mental toolkit to properly imagine or order a convincing plot. What I assumed, though, was that I didn't have talent, and thus I gave up. In Stephen King's On Writing, he gives the advice that good writing is simply predicated on a lot of reading and a lot of writing. And while this is true of pretty much all skills, being that practice is important, it seems the ways in which writers practice and the practice done in other creative pursuits is quite different. An obscure example of the difference between writing and other skills is prodigies. Prodigies often amass a high amount of competence in a domain extremely quickly, and it's common to think that the best in any skill are going to be the ones that are the most prodigious. But the interest in prodigies in relation to writing is that they barely exist. The only remotely prodigious writer I can think of is Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein at 18. But this is no Mozart making symphonies at 12. Writing seems to lack prodigies because writing takes experience. At least this is conventional wisdom. But can we really say that Tolkien was drawing on experience when writing the world of Lord of the Rings? It seems that writing does seem to be different from other creative pursuits, and this elusive experience seems to be something other than the aforementioned. In the book Range, David Epstein makes the case that there are two types of learning environments. These are kind and wicked domains. Kind domains are ones like chess and music, where patterns and feedback are obvious, and the objective is simply to execute a pattern without error.
Fucking Al, you suck!
A wicked domain, on the other hand, is a skill where patterns aren't as identifiable, and creative thinking is needed to make any headway. It's hard to discern objective paths forward or ways to improve in kind domains, and skill comes more from an execution of a novel idea as opposed to a learned pattern. Because prodigies feed off pattern recognition and input, they only really exist in kind domains. Most skills are a mix of both learning environments, but particularly in writing's case, it seems to skew toward being a wicked environment. And while this does mean that you don't have to be a prodigy to get better at writing, it does mean that you learn slower in it. And so, it might be tempting to put our hats up and begin the slow and painful process of learning to write, but what if we could strike a balance? What if we could make writing more kind? This idea in question is exactly what brought me back to writing. Writing's wickedness seems to stem from the process of putting execution over fundamentals. While there are a lot of skills where it might be better to throw yourself in the ring without ever learning how the game works, this might not be the best method for writing. This would then beg the question of how we would isolate practice from creation, and I think the answer lies in analogy. When I used to draw as a kid, I think one thing that made me better than other kids was that I would copy and deconstruct drawings I saw, as opposed to simply drawing from imagination. This allowed me to see what made a drawing appealing and why, and I think a similar principle can be applied to writing. A simple example of this, that many screenwriters already do, is to simply analyze and break down a story while watching, noting any prediction you make or why you think a certain part is included. And while this is useful, I think it can be taken a step further. A second analogy to drawing is that of iteration. Often artists will iterate by taking a piece of art that they like and changing things about it to see what happens. For example, changing the eyebrows of a character might reveal that doing so gives it a particular personality. It is essentially a process of learning by trial and error. An analog of writing I've tried is rewriting a scene I've already seen in a piece of media and keeping the beginning and end, but changing what's in the middle. I found that not only did this exercise help my ability to understand how certain character traits affect a story, but also helped with my ability to imagine scenes universally. But the one practice method I find the most interesting is what I call touchstone writing. Touchstone writing is when you predict a story using information given about it, and then compare to see where your version and the original differ. In concrete terms, it involves taking a story and rewriting it, before you've ever seen it. You gather particular information on the story, and then you fill in gaps in the information that you don't know. You then take your written version and compare to see every difference, because it's not necessarily the case that every difference is meaningful, or that your version is necessarily inferior, but the goal is simply to highlight any meaningful differences you see, and why they exist. I think this exercise is interesting because it allows you to work on creating a convincing and interesting plot while having immediate feedback and without the need to imagine a whole world and characters. I have many more exercises I could get into, but I don't have the time and I think you get the idea. So to go back for a minute, I understand that not everyone may agree with these methods, and I'm no master writer and I don't have all the answers. But for the longest time, writing was hell, and beginning to write using practice methods like these have seriously made me a better writer and made the skill as a whole a lot more enjoyable. It's like I learned to type after wanting to code for the longest time. I'm probably not the first person to come up with a practice similar to this, but no one ever told me that there were other ways to practice besides the conventional, just write. And so, if you're anything like me, I urge you to at least give these methods a chance. I want people to practice with, I want people to create exercises with, and most importantly, I want to see if I'm wrong. So, I've created a $1,000 course put together in a day, which gives you common sense information in an inactive Discord server. Sorry, I got possessed by Tyler Mowry for a second. I have a Discord server for anyone if they want to join and become part of a club of this kind learning environment for writers. So please join because blah blah blah.